Hello everyone. In last week we have finished our course, and in this lecture. So this is the last lecture of the class, and today we are not going to introduce any new material. It's a chance just to look back at the things that we have seen so far, and again take stock of where is the field and the state of art in the robotics, and what's been done so far, what's happening right now, where is the future going to lead us. And we are going to look at all these armed with the knowledge that we have acquired throughout these classes. Okay, so let's get started. And the first, let's look at a little bit again at the past. And I like to think not in just terms of the past, but in the terms of Hall of Fame, in the sense again, because the robot has done tremendous impact on the society. So I have used this robot ABB IRB 120, and the fact that society as we know it would not exist without robotics and automation in assembly and manufacturing and in industry and many parts of the industry, places that we don't see in everyday life, but nonetheless they support a lot of things that we use in our everyday life. So the world of industrial robot arms, and here I have chosen this robot. So if we consider the first way of traditional robot arms to illustrate this, or so in the first stage of robotics, it has an impact on society through industry, and how we these robots really used it also make an much change in our daily life. So now we can look at the tools that we have acquired throughout the class, and what really happen is that in general for a robot like this, somebody will come and specify and say, I like, for example, the end effector to be placed at some location in the environment. So he would likely giving the some Q goal. Or he said that I have some position in the environment, I want the end effector to be placed there. So uh, in a specific so it wants to place an end effector in a specific location in the environment. So where it will pick something, and then I'd like the end effector to go to different location in the environment where it will put down the object. So for example, a human will specify that this is the position of the end effector that I like, and then inverse kinematics will translate that to set of joint position, and the robot goes ahead and execute that. So maybe it's a welding robot, and so we don't just care about one position for the end effector. Maybe we'd like the end effector to describe a certain path in the environment. Okay, so then human operator will say that I like the end effector to take it, and then we will have Cartesian control translate that into joint velocities, and the human operator is directly, or maybe it's different kind of task, and human operator is directly telling us that the joint values that they like the robot to go. In all of these cases there is a human operator you will see, and the input of these three arrows that you are seeing are coming from a human operator and telling to the robot to go to somewhere it needs to. So the output of joint positions, desired joint position, or desired joint velocities, and in the class this is what we have looking at. So how do you get these joint positions, how do you get these joint velocities, and we have content to say that once you have them, uh, they get sent to the robot and the robot executes them. So what actually happened behind the scene is that the robot will be running controllers at each time. So once the output comes from here, it will be running controller, and this controller generally will have an update loop. So that's very fast, probably more than 1 kilohertz or at least 1 kilohertz. But once you send a desired joint position goal to the controller, this is a traditional feedback controller, probably you know a PID or something similar, that will make sure that the joint position that you have requested actually get executed. And this is where there is a closed loop, because what happens is that the motor or the joint will have some position encoder, and so any point so at any time the robot knows that the precise position of its joints, the motor controller will close the loop and will send the current commands to the motor, and the loop will close with motor position or joint position information from the encoder. So this is the loop that is close or very fast. Okay, and make sure that the joint position we command get executed. So this is an entire aspect of robotics that's very important that we have had a chance to cover in the class. But the low level controller is always there in this, making sure that what we command actually it happens. So then the motor positions the joint in turn move the links, and the link gets the position at certain place in the environment. Okay, so as a result the last link is the end effector, and the end effector gets placed somewhere where it does what it needs to do on the world, like pick up an object, or maybe the end effector again is a welding tool. So then the end effector does its welding job along the path. What are a couple of things that I like you to notice here once again, and by now you are intimately familiar with these probably. So first of all, the world is very carefully controlled. So that's the only way we can ensure that the robot isn't really hitting anything along the way. And this is the mostly an open loop behavior if you see from here to here. The open loop that's being closed is at the joint level only, and this is the only place where the loop is being closed. And other than that, who is making sure that the robot isn't hit anything, that something unexpected has, if something unexpected come in the world and if robot is working, who will make sure that it will not hit anything. So maybe the object is somewhere else than we expected it to be. So the human operator clearly controlling the world, issuing the command to the robot, and there is no really automated way to close the loop throughout this process. So these robots are performing pre-programmed movement, and but the way they are doing it, a lot of the value that they bring are incredibly precise, and they're working tirelessly. So there is a little feedback from the environment that almost no sensing to speak of. So of course joint position sensing is a form of sensing. So it's not like these robots are completely sensorless. There is a sensing, but uh, there isn't sensing in kind of higher level sense. So what we expect, for example, vision, we will get to that in a second in next slide. So there is a little feedback from the environment that you will see, right? So and it would seem like in very limited robots, or in a way that it will impact your the working condition of a robot if you have some feedback from your environment. So we'll see in next slide. Okay, so what's next? Now if the Hall of Fame here are almost, or something that people are working on it right now, and these technologies are just now starting to make their way from research labs into deployment or so into industry. So which is why I refer to them here as the leading edge. Okay, so I think of them maybe this decade, this past decade, or where are the research results that are now starting to translate from the research lab research labs to the industry. And some of the main things that are starting to happen is that the robotics is starting to integrate a higher level type of environment sensing. And what kind of environment sensing? Well, first of all, just a notion. So a notion of geometry of the world around the robot, or so the robot says the geometry of the world around. Where does the robot get that information? Vision is very tempting. So people are so unbelievably good at understanding the geometry of a scene just by looking at a single time or single image. You or me, we look at this image and we know, oh, this is a flat floor here, you have wall, you have furniture over here, and we understand the geometry of the scene. And for example, you're not hitting anything if you move, so you can plan the path in that way. So this is difficult problem to do so if that kind of geometry analysis from the image if you're doing. So it's being done, it's being worked on in last decades, and there are other ways for robots to get this kind of geometrical information of the world around them. So laser sensors, for example, stereo vision, and many more things. But the main thing is that robots are starting to get sense of the geometry of their environment based on their own senses. More type of sensings that are being introduced are force robots. So for example, force robots sense how much force they are applying to the world, or touch, so feeling when they have touched something in environment, or so what does the pipeline that we have looked at before, what does it look like once you start integrating all of the kind of sensing? So here you can see one example, and of the world that so of the world seen as what's called a point cloud right here. So if you see these purple dots, these are the point clouds, and the robot that you are seeing here is the PR2 robot, which has a laser sensor on its neck here. Okay, and essentially at this level you can see it, and all the purple points, those are points where the laser touches the robot. Here there is something in the environment, and the robot doesn't know what it is. It has no semantic information, but it knows that there is something there. If you take this to the extreme, it's very important to have some semantic sense of what things are, because if you only have the knowledge that there is something there in the environment, how you see the robot is actually seeing its own arm. So if it is just seeing that there is something in the environment, and these purple dots are, you will see that they are on its own arms. So robot might treat its own arm as if they were obstacle, right? So it's important to start processing this raw data that you get from the sensors and getting what we call semantic information from the world, and we'll get to that a little bit later in this lecture only. So let's say that we take all of this information that we have, and we integrate into our manipulator pipeline. Okay, so we have our robot as before, and here this is the goal position, and that the end effector needs to go. Expect that now maybe this goal position is coming from some human operator. I will correct it. This is not Q goal, this is goal position. Okay, so this is the position, goal position that the end effector needs to go, and expect that now maybe this goal position is coming from some human operator. Maybe it's coming from the robot's own vision that it needs to go. So in any case, once we have this position goal from the end effector, we have inverse kinematics which we know how to do, and which give us that there is where the joint of the robots needs to go. So this is where sensing starts come into play. So we have the world that's being observed by some sort of sensor. Okay, and again this sensor is just telling us something about the geometry of the scene around us. Usually that's come in the form of the point cloud. Okay, so as we have seen in the last example, like this. So it is in the form of the point cloud. So all purple, all the points that you have shown in here were example of the point cloud. And what a point cloud means is that, again, you know that there are things will be there in the environment. So you don't know what object they belong to or the role that they play. You just know that there are some obstacle there in the environment. So you have the point cloud if you just simply keep accumulating information from the sensors, and the laser rays sensor, for example, will operate maybe at 30 Hz or maybe 100 Hz, and visor sensor will operate at 30 Hz. You will get a lot of information 30 times a second, and the sensor will tell you what's in the environment. A lot of that information is redundant because things are not moving in the environment. If then what you will do, so if you have just list everything your sensors have ever told you, you will run out of memory if you store everything. So then what you need is the notion of an environment representation. So some way to represent your environment so that you can take the sensory information that you get, you add the information that you didn't No, you throw away the information that you already had, and you are building the robot, or the robot is building a model of what the surrounding environments look like. So there are many ways to create these type of models, and many research papers on that topic. So for point clouds, a very common way for storing information is something called as octree. So which is something that you can investigate. Octree, OCTRRE, OCTREE, and which is what is very roughly shown in this picture, in the last picture. But ultimately, what do we need once the robot has this model or this environment representation, this model of the environment that built based on the raw sensor data. In our case, those are point clouds. So this model of the environments allow the robot uh, 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 to know where certain configuration are in collision with some in the world. So what is that used for? We have already seen some algorithm that make use of this information that just tell the robot that the position is in collision, so it should be avoided. But now instead of human having to specify exactly how the robot needs to go to the goal, some goal, without hitting anything, and the human making uh, sure that the environment never changes, so that the path of the robot is always collision free. So the robot can compute its own path through the environment, taking advantage of collision model. Okay, and this environment representation from here, and the way it computes the path, one possibly that's the motion planning problem. Uh, we have looked at exact algorithm for that, for example RRT, PRMs, and many other algorithm, right? So this is shown in there is one example of simple RRT. So what matters here is that the starting from just the desired post Q goal, and the robot is computing an entire path to get from the current position to the goal. Okay, so you will have this and you will just compute the entire path from position start to the goal. Okay, so what happens to the path after it's computed? Again, there is something that we haven't had chance to cover in the class. Okay, so we have just said it just sent to the robot for execution. So there is one additional step that needs to be happen, where you go from a path to a trajectory. So you add timing information, joint velocity, and joint acceleration uh, information. You make sure first of all that the path is sufficiently smooth. Here is a path in a two-dimensional joint space. You can see you have yellow line here, but the path is something like in white, like this, without yellow line. And so a trajectory generator will compute a smooth version of this path that a robot can execute without stopping. Because if robot moves here, it will first come from here to here, it will stop, then change the direction, it will go here, stop, change the direction, and then. But what robot will do, it will plan a trajectory so that it doesn't have to stop, it will not have jerk, and it will go smoothly from this path. Okay, so each robot will have limits in terms of how fast it can accelerate at each joint because of the mass constraints and how powerful the motors are. So again, going from the path to a trajectory is something that needs to happen, and again it's a low level, it's something that at a low level that we haven't covered in the class, but it's always present there. And then the result of that gets again fed into our controller. Okay, so whatever results comes, that will fed into a controller which will control the joint. So we have already covered this. So for example, the controller can be PID, position controller again, or we are closing the loop here using the motor encoders. Okay, and or the joint encoders on the position, and this controller running very fast, again maybe more than 1 kilohertz, that has the kind of feedback, and it's ensuring that the joint follow the trajectory that we have requested. So what happens next? In the past we have said that the motor positions the link, and the link position the end effector, right? So that's good, but really what if we care just about the position? what we don't really care about the force. Means we also care about the position, but we also care about the force then the robot is applying in the environment. So what will happen? Okay, so the the controller is commanding some level of current to the motor here, and that motor is spins and it produces some torque. Okay, and this torque usually doesn't get sent directly to the joint. You will have in between some transmission in the middle. It may be a gearbox. So the motor applies some torque to the transmission. The transmission then applies some torque to the joint, and the joint moves the link and applies the force to the world. Okay, so you have seen that we have closed the loop in multiple ways here. In previous slides, the loop was open, only it was closed here. Now it is fully closed. You also have sensors in the world to see how your robot is working. Okay, so we have this loop being closed very fast based on just position information. But now we have this big loop that's being closed based on the sensing, vision sensing, range sensing, anything it can be. So up here we have our range sensor that's observing the world. So it's seeing what the robot is doing in the world. Of course, this loop isn't being closed as fast as this controller is working, but this is happening maybe at 1 kilohertz. This thing, and here it's happening maybe at 30 hertz. So the motion planner, a good motion planner, will compute the motion plan for a complicated environment, and maybe it will give you output in 200 milliseconds or something like that, maybe even faster. But if something happens, let's say somebody jumps in front of the robot while it's working, and the vision sensor will see that the motion planner will compute a new path around the obstacle. As soon as the vision sensor sees some obstacle, it will make a trajectory. It will be sampled and sent to the controller. Okay, so even though this loop, this big loop, it's being closed as fast as the position loop right here, it's still enough to react in case an unexpected obstacle shown up in front of the robot, right? So which is very important, and there are other ways that we can close the loop. So a very important method that used right now by number of robot manufacturers that are out on the leading edge is to actually sense the torque that are being applied. Okay, and which is very difficult problem, because if you know the current that's being sent to the motor, it's difficult to also have an exact model of the torque that the motor is outputting, and even worse, you know the torque being fed into the transmission, and it's very difficult to know the torque exactly that's coming out of the transmission because of the friction or maybe some non-linear phenomena that's happening inside of the transmission. So it's very difficult to model. So what some manufacturers are doing now, and this is something that was academic research until some years ago and now is being actively deployed in the world. So if you have a spring element inside the transmission and then you have one encoder on the motor and one encoder at the joint. So so based on the difference between the two encoders, you can know how much the spring has deflected. Okay, and that will give you the measure of the torque that being applied from here and what you got here. Okay, so this will give you the measure of the torque being applied to the joint. So this is what's called series elastic actuation. And really the take home message here is that with a couple of additional encoders, what you get is the measure of torque being applied to in the joint. Because if the robot hits something unexpectedly, you will see the torque at the joints will spike. Okay, so that information you will send it to the collision controller, a motion planner, that torque is suddenly increased. So your motion planner, so if your torque exceeds the level that you expect, then you go ahead and say stop. So I have a collision, and then you ask the motion planner to replan a new path that takes into account where you expect that collision has occurred. So again, more ways to close this loop. So here you again you have closed the loop, right? In a way, this is what robotics is pushing towards, closing the loop and operating based on sensed feedback from the environment. Now closing the loop based on vision, closing the loop based on joint talks we have seen, right? And we have always been able to close the loop based on joint position. That's always there. So if your links, the robot links are equipped with some touch sensor, let's say. So the human skin that you see, we have very amazing touch capabilities. So if someone touches you, you can react according to it. So if the robot links are covered with, let's say, touch sensors, and the link itself can detect the touch, and if it's something unexpected, or I'm touching something, I'm going to put that information into the environment representation. And so now the motion planner takes into account when it plans a new path in the environment. In a way, that's what we do. It will take into consideration that touch. So we touch something here, we back up, and then we go around, right? So you have another closed loop over here. So let's look into a practice. So exactly what's our internal representation of the world, nobody knows, but it's got to be good, because we seems to be able to do pretty complicated tasks because of the feedback, right? So now let's look at one example. Yes, here. So let's take a look in practice what this look like. And this is an example of the pipeline implemented in an academic paper. Okay. So again, this is with the PR2 robot. Okay, and it starts with sensing, and here is the robot acquiring raw data from the laser. So it is moving and it's acquiring raw data from the laser, and the laser, if you see, it's tilting up and down on the neck, right? And now the data is being processed, it's being filtered. For example, now the robot's own body is being filtered, which is very important. So now you will not see any data on the robot arms, and treat them as obstacles, right? So once we have the data filtered, the environment model based again on an octree, 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 you can search for it, based on octree representation. And now we start doing more interesting sensing, where we do some more semantic information. So we try to detect based on vision what objects in the scenes, and actually specific object identities. So there is a cup, there is a bowl. So what is the important? So here you can see there is a cup, there is a bowl over here. So what's important over here? We don't need the human operator to tell us how the position of the gripper in order to grasp the object, but we can have automated grasp planner that tell us exactly where the gripper needs to go for an effective grasp. Okay, and that is the robot having computer grasp. Once we know where the gripper needs to go to execute a grasp, then that becomes the send to the classic motion planning problem, which is how we get the arm into the grasping without hitting anything in the environment. Okay, so here now, so the robot can generate a path of its own body for the object that it's holding, that are avoiding all the obstacles in the environment. Here is the robot planning collision free path based on these environment models generated. So using this tilting laser that you see on the chest, and is now know where it is holding an object, it's avoiding collision. So then this particular robot can have the motion planning here and more advanced. So for example, it can plan paths that have additional constraints, like keep the object in a specific orientation. Okay, not necessarily very relevant for that stapler, but you can imagine if you are holding a glass of water, you don't want the motion planner to come up with a plan that will twist the glass. So this robot will close the loop again It has tactile sensors, so not on the arm but on the fingertips. Both fingertips have tactile sensor. So then, as this robot touches an object, what it's able to do, if it touch the sensor, tell it is the object is an unexpected location based on, and it's not exactly what I thought it would be. So then it can adapt by improving the grasp based on the touch sensation. So closing the loop based on tactile feedback, more way to close the loop. Then it comes together to what we call it as complete pick and place operation. And here the robot detecting the environment, detecting the object, planning a grasp, adjusting the grasp based on tactile feedback, picking up the object, and planning movement that avoids any collision with the environment. So finding any, yeah. So this is obviously an toy problem. These kind of improvements you can do. So here it's not to be pre-programmed by a human operator. The robot in a way becomes more intelligent in the sense to be able to react and unexpected changes in the environment. And one other possible or definition, you can say that robot becomes more intelligent. So this is all what we also talked about in our first lecture of the class. So that's all from my side, and now so this is the end of these lectures, and this was just the representation of what's going on in the current field, current robotics representation, what we have covered in the class, and now you will have some knowledge what we have not covered, what's left. Yeah. So there are many research field if you want to go in, and many things you can cover in advanced courses, maybe in masters or in future. So you will have some topic based on something, and you can work on it in research, right? So that's all from my this course. I hope you have enjoyed this course. This course, Introduction to Robotics, if you have observed, you have introduction of many things. You didn't have very deep explanation of everything because it's just the introduction. So I tried to introduce everything. At least you will have idea of everything, starting from the kinematics, then path planning, and for manipulator, and for robot arm, and even the path planning. So you have idea of everything, and or you can say the introduction of everything. So this is what we have covered, and you can give your feedback after this course is finished, so that it can be, if some improvement is needed, I can improve it for the next lot of batch. One more information. So as per the discussion that I had with the HODs, your minor 2 is not yet done, and so the marks for minor 2 has to be calculated, or minor 2 has to be evaluated, and it will be evaluated based on the assignments that you are submitting now. And maybe I can have one quiz to add it up more marks in the minor 2, and combining assignment and quizzes, you will have your minor 2 marks. So that's what we were planning. No information regarding the final exam, but minor 2 we are discussing something like this. So maybe in few days, maybe in 2-3 days, you will have a quiz, and the assignment that I have given to you, which you have to submit by 30th of April. Please submit it on time, because if you submit it late, and if I am considering it for minor, I have to deduct some marks from you. So please do not make it late. Whatever assignments I have given, please try to submit all. Okay, so that's all. Thank you everyone. We will close our lecture here. Thank you.